Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Planning and Investment Dr. Sonexay Siphandone told the National Assembly last week the government would try to limit the numbers of new projects which did not guarantee a significant economic return. He said the government will inspect and review projects to identify which ones we should continue with and which one we should suspend. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Planning and Investment Dr. Sonexay Siphandone said we will encourage businesses to engage in government-funded development projects through public-private partnerships, especially for the construction of roads, irrigation systems, and other amenities. This should motivate the private sector to engage in development, reducing the burden of the state budget. Several projects have already been carried out through public-private partnerships. In addition, the government has announced that the implementation of all state-funded projects must comply with the laws, and the number of unauthorized projects and previous privately funded projects will be restricted. According to Dr. Sonexay Siphandone, the government will continue to settle the debts owed to major creditors by converting debts into capital, which will involve granting concessions for the use of state land. Over the past 5 years, the government has attempted to shrink its debts burden by reducing the fiscal deficit and cutting spending on non-essential projects that do not guarantee economic returns. Other measures to reduce the debt burden include converting debt into capital, selling state assets, and selling shares in state enterprises. The COVID-19 pandemic has ramped up Laos' public debt burden, making it even harder for Laos to address its obligations. Minister of Finance Mr. Buntjom told the National Assembly that the amount of interest owed on loans were increasing substantially, with the amounts needed to repay loans expected to increase to between 4,000 and 5,000 billion kip annually. Responding to questions raised by National Assembly members about how the government manages its debts, Mr. Buntjom said the government had attempted to limit the amount of money it borrows and reduce the fiscal deficit. He said, secondly, we won't accept unauthorized projects. Groups that carry out development projects without National Assembly approval must be responsible for repaying any debts incurred in the construction of those projects. In the past, the government has issued bonds and borrowed more money from previous sources to address budget shortages. However, this only takes care of the problem in the short term. In the future, any new state-funded projects will be implemented based on the available budget. Despite budgetary tensions since 2017, the government has paid off more than 11 trillion kip of the debts that it has accumulated over the past several years. Debt repayment has been made in the form of cash and through the Triangle Debt Diversion Disbursement Initiative, which transferred the government's debt burden from private companies to commercial banks. The 11 trillion kip payment amounts to 19% of the total debt owed to companies that completely undertook the construction of various infrastructure projects.